also it was fresh because it was a kind of a British take on a very at that point Americanized genre, which is the zombie genre. I know they're not zombies, but please, if it still falls into the same genre, please, if you're really one of those people who still goes, excuse me, they're actually technically still alive, you can do one. I'm back.
Welcome back.
Thank you very much.
You're looking very refreshed.
Thank you.
So glad to hear you've had your break.
If you remember, what was for the listeners only last week, but was for us 3 weeks ago. Yeah. I was saying I needed to regenerate like Doctor Who, and I do feel like a little bit like that.
You were buffering in real time in the edit, and it was quite fun to watch you go and get really animated once Shawshank Redemption got brought up, which turned into a lovely little rant about how Shawshank is great.
I've said this before. This is what I've realised. Talking about film is basically the thing I can do under any circumstances.
Yes.
Even if I'm extremely tired. I've talked to people about movies at 3 o'clock in the morning at an airport.
Let's go.
Yeah, 4 p.m. Anytime. I can just... part of my brain takes over.
Yeah.
The rest of the brain
doesn't.
And
it throws people sometimes because they'll be like, God, you really like this stuff. And I'll be like, yeah. It's all week. I'm thinking, talking, seeing. Where do you want to... This is nothing to me.
No, this is, please, give me a real challenge.
This is my job.
James and I haven't seen each other in about 3 weeks.
Yes,
this is in person. We sort of banked the episodes, and if you haven't caught up on the past few weeks, please do so. And last week we did the Perfect movies.
Big episode. We ruffled a lot of feathers.
Yeah.
I think it's a really great, fun episode. The more inherently you talk about the conversation, the more the entire concept completely falls apart.
Absolutely.
And the more films you start nominating and bringing in, the more it sort of it dilutes the very perfection of some of the perfect films. But immediately when me and George, well, immediately, an hour later when we were walking into town, we both just went, The School of Rock!
Yeah.
The School of Rock is a perfect film. And I think you had said before, it's a film that if someone said they didn't like, you'd be like, I'm sorry, what?
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
But what went wrong with you that you didn't like The School of Rock? But anyway... I know you guys have sent in a load of your own submissions for what would be perfect films, and we will 100% revisit the conversation. But we just got so many, we were like, we'll park it, we'll come back to it.
We'll collate them and talk about
I'm sure if you
them.
throw in a perfect film at the end of another email, we'll read it out and discuss it. But
I think it'll be quite easy to go through because obviously, I guess it's subjective. We'll probably just go no. Oh, maybe. But
go check that out.
Go
if
check
you
that out.
Already. We gave a list of 10/11 perfect movies, and we're quite proud of that list. I still stand by the list.
Oh, I stand by the list.
So go and check it out if you haven't already.
And this week's going to be we're into the bumper sort of summer blockbuster season now. So we've got F1 to talk about today. James has seen it. I haven't seen it. I'm seeing it tonight because I've been away. Also talking the main event 28 years later. We've got an interview with Alex Garland and Danny Boyle. James did while I was away, and we're going to be talking about the movie, and we're going to be dropping a spoiler cast discussion later this week as well.
For that.
But before we begin, when you're on holiday, one of the benefits of being away for a while is that the conversation changes, the topics change, the way you discuss things change, and I went away with Anna, and the conversations you're having on day 1 and 2 are not the same as you're having on day 8 and 9.
Yeah, of course.
And true to that, I wanted to raise one of the topics that we talked about and put it to you.
This is timesheets.
It's not timesheets, James. No, we haven't got time for that.
We haven't got time.
Still comes across my mind.
Me too.
It's still a very important part. It's still very important.
We're both spreading further in our own way.
Like Magneto and Professor X. The
timesheets argument was so good, sorry.
Anyway, this conversation Anna and I had outside a gelateria in Spain. Although most people would associate great gelato from Italy, but I have to say, this gelateria in Menorca is probably the best I've ever had.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Yeah. But the question, of course, James, is what is your favourite font?
Oh, you can ask about ice cream.
No.
The answer is Garamond.
Wow, Anna raised Garamond as well.
I like Garamond. It's smart, but it's something different. So yes, you could go Times New Roman, but it almost has Times New Roman's got so much less to say. And as a naturally informal person, which I am, I don't exist in any refined corporate structure that requires a font of me. I like to appear smart sometimes, but I'd also not. I'd want to sort of put my own individual spin on it, and that's where Garamond usually comes in. If we're talking for I don't know what I'm writing. Again, I really have no use for fonts in a formal context.
Let's say it's a cover letter or a CV.
Yeah, it
Still
would
go
be
for Garamond.
It'd be Garamond.
Is Garamond a serif or a sans serif font?
You know the answer to that.
I genuinely don't because I don't.
I thought you knew.
I know that because this is.
What's serif and sans serif?
Oh no, I know the difference between that.
Yeah,
but
yeah,
I genuinely don't know whether Garamond is one or the other. Let's find out. So Garamond is a serif typeface. So this is how, by the way, this is how this conversation came. So Aaron and I were having this gelato, and we were looking at the logo.
Day 8 or 9.
This is so day 8 or 9.
Oh, I do like talking about font choice.
It was the logo of which was a very clean, lovely, and they had gone for a serif logo, but a sans serif description.
Explain for the people.
So sans, I'm not a graphic designer, but like in sort of typology, typography rather, the description of
I get what you mean.
words and letters on a page. A serif font is typically when you see it when it has like a G ending with a line. You know, you have the lines at the ends of letters. So imagine a P. When it reaches the bottom line, it spreads out into a line. You see that? It's slightly more formal. It's slightly more. Times New Roman is a serif font. Okay, sans serif, meaning without serif, is a font like Calibri or Comic Sans, which has none of those formal lines. Okay, they actually have different roles. You can have smart sans serif fonts, but anyway.
Pulp Kitchen font.
Pulp Kitchen. No, Pulp Kitchen is a serif font.
Oh.
I'll show you right now. I'm going to pull it up for you.
I'm looking at it behind you.
Oh, yeah. Well, it's right behind us.
Yeah.
Now, that is a serif font. Well, it's kind of in between, but I think with the way the P splays out at the bottom, that's a serif font.
Serifing.
That
it's
is
giving
so serifing. But a sans serif font would have none of that.
Yeah, okay.
And we were talking about the differences in that and the things. And Garamond is a serif font.
Yes.
Which is, I'm looking at it now. Garamond looks lovely.
Go and
Helvetica, by the way, is what I would say, which is a sans serif font.
Yeah.
That's the smart sans serif font.
Yeah. I quite like Arial.
Arial, Arial's Calibri in a suit. You know, it's just like it's fine, but it's a bit formal for me. Times New Roman is like a stuffy accountant that everyone go back to the 90s.
But there is a time and a place where, do you know what, just put it in Times New Roman.
You think so?
Yeah, of course.
Do you know what is a little spin I do, which I quite like, is that everyone uses Calibri now, which is it's a nice font and it's the default now.
It's the default on a lot of things.
But Calibri Light. Oh, hello.
Ooh.
Yeah. I used to write my emails in Calibri Light.
Like when you get a Domino's, but you get the Italian crust. Yeah. It's for the discerning pizza consumer.
And part of you thinks, that's really cool. And part of you thinks, if my life has come to making joy out of small choices of font, I'm dead inside.
I think there's like all those rules about Comic Sans should never be acceptable only for a primary school sign. That's basically the only time Comic Sans is acceptable. No menus, no shop signs, no work of any kind. It's cute for small children. Yeah. For anyone else, it's horribly offensive. Its attempt to be casual is nauseous.
If you wrote me a message and said, I don't like School of Rock, and you wrote it in Comic Sans, I'd be like,
we're done.
Execute you.
We're out of here.
You're done. You're right, back of the head.
No, font is really important. Pulp Kitchen has evolved its font.
Originally, it was a sans serif font.
It was a bready, thick, heavy, drop shadowed, sesame speckled font. And then we sort of reduced the skeuomorphism slightly. Do you know about skeuomorphism?
Yeah,
in technology, like if you look at old Windows XP and Vista slightly, and old iPhone OS. This is true of all operating systems, but you can track it easy with iPhone. OS used to have depth and shadow, and it used to feel like it wanted to feel like a real place that you were looking at and into. And then as we refine, this has happened with all sorts of logos and brands. You can look at like the Walkers and Pringles logo. Things have become 2D,
depixelized.
Depixelized. There's very little shadows, no sense of depth.
You look at the original iPhone screen as well, right?
Oh my god, yeah. And like, just like old crisp packets, the text would like burst out of the packet, and it was engaging. Whereas now we've gone minimal and clean, and it's happening more and more and more. And you look at the app logos for loads of tech companies. They've all gone really clean.
Love that sheen. Look at compare the original Instagram like bevel, not bevel, like it was like an actual camera.
Yes, like with a lighting gradient, as if it had been shot somewhere real,
like a physical thing.
Yes,
yeah.
I rarely in my life have to choose those types of fonts.
Yeah,
do you know what I mean? I only actually am confronted with that type of font choice. Often it's more creative, fun, captions, logo. And it's just there are fewer rules because I can be more expressive creatively. So luckily I don't make font choices. When you worked at your job, was it like very prescriptive over the fonts that we
Yes,
use.
the brand fonts were agreed upon on set, which is fine. You know, it's good for
and
brand.
for like an architectural designy place, very important.
It was Helvetica New. NEU, yeah. And then when we ever had to like get people to do what we had to export that, you give them in the templates. It's like there has to be written in Helvetica New.
Like main title, subtitle,
absolutely.
lighter, and when to use
we
the
would
lighter
create
one.
brand documents. We would go, hang on, someone's using Helvetica Heavy. This is Helvetica. It was me.
Sorry guys, everyone stop working, please.
That was my job. Excuse me, space that out. The kerning's not right on that. I'd put that left. Hang on.
Yeah.
Anyway,
sorry.
No, it's funny. It's nice.
I guess in one world, I'd like to be a person that had to make more font choices, or that lived inside the parameters of like font, and it's like, oh, I'll use Helvetica.
The closest I do now is with social media. Sometimes with the posting is like the poster logo, you know, the poster font on.
Very similar to our, no, not regards, to Recoleta.
That's right.
Yes.
But then there's also Deco, which I like because it's clean and thin.
And what's annoying about social media is that they change their fonts, I'd say every 18 months.
Yeah.
And they're different between different apps. So I'll get really into a font. And then sometimes they'll have like, there used to be a very Garamond-like font on the Instagram stories that I used to quite enjoy. And then they changed it to literature, which is similar but not the same.
Yeah.
And ever since they changed it, I don't fuck with it anymore.
Nah.
It's like it died for me.
Anyway.
It's like someone changing the recipe of my favourite food.
Yeah, a little bit.
Just a little bit.
But enough to
I'm
make it bad.
I've noticed it.
Yeah.
Someone who's just turned up, be like, yeah, it's all been the same. And I'm like, no. It used to be. It used to mean something. Damn it! It's real to me. Anyway, you just unlocked like something I've never said out loud, but in my head, I've been. Anyway,
that was some fonts. But anyway, let's get on. Let's drop the fonts. Get on with the films. This is a quick message brought to you in partnership with our friends at Airbnb.
So my new flat is nearly ready. I'm so close to getting the keys.
I'm really excited to see it. It feels like you've been working on it for ages, like a villain building a secret lair.
I am. I'm like an emperor overseeing the finishing touches on my master plan.
I'm very excited. I hope you've thought about where we're going to record the podcast.
George, genuinely, it is all I think about in the day. I think about where we're going to sit, the neon sign, tea and coffee provision, squeaky chairs. I lie awake thinking about it all the time.
Excellent, as you should.
And what's really exciting is just having a little bit of extra space for hosting people.
Oh, I'll take that as an invitation.
And also, I've been thinking about how I can host my flat on Airbnb while I'm away.
Yes, every time we talk about this, I think it's such a good idea.
Exactly, and I'm excited at the idea of having a little bit of extra money on the side. I can put that towards the next trip, or even some nice furnishings for the flat.
Oh, lovely. What are we talking about? Lamps, coasters, rugs, cushions? Or throw? You love a throw.
Oh, I do like a throw. I'm quite excited by the idea of having this fun little side project where I host on Airbnb. Plus, it's really practical, super convenient, especially with our lifestyles and how often we travel.
And what a great feeling too, to know that your home can be making you a little bit of extra money while you're away.
So, your home might be worth more than you think. Find out how much by going to airbnb.co.uk/host.
Fun, James, because that's what that's the sound the cars make when they go past you. Fun.
F1.
And I want to know, James, does he drive fast?
He drives bloody fast, and he has to drive faster than he thought he'd have to drive. And there's someone else who wants to drive fast, and they both need to drive fast, but are they driving fast to each other's detriment?
Does the car go vroom?
Oh, it goes real big vroom, and the pit stop.
Oh, nice.
Great. F1, a film that's been in production for a while from like the purely external perspective. This is a Joseph Kosinski film who most recently had a huge success with Mr. Tom Cruise and Top Gun Maverick, which not pioneered, but sort of became re-established this big IMAX action. Things go very fast and they zoom past the screen. And I think we were so much more impressed with Top Gun Maverick than I thought I was going to be. And I remember thinking like that film had no right to be as good as it was. And I never, yes, it's a Top Gun film, but it almost has completely superseded Top Gun in my eyes. And I'm sure there will be a sequel again, but I will very much consider it like a sequel to Top Gun Maverick versus like a sequel to Top Gun. Do you know what I mean? And we were both just really impressed with it. And I thought, great, he's going to go and do an F1 film with Brad Pitt, and they're going to do the same thing but on the ground. And I think that's going to look like really good fun. And we saw the trailer; it looked very slick, and it's that Apple TV Plus type film, but you don't really know. They're like keeping it a secret, but it's got that very slick, very high budget, premium, sort of like kind of like digital looking, but in a good way.
Yeah, it's like the fact that it's an Apple TV Plus movie makes it's like an Easter egg.
Yes,
it's like surprise.
It's Easter egg. When you go and see the film, there's like the little sort of large apple that you go, oh yeah, it's an Apple TV Plus film. Yeah, we would watch it for free in like 3 months. But very much advertised like big screen, IMAX, very cool poster of Brad Pitt looking very cool. And sorry, they're filming it for a really long time because this film was filmed in conjunction and adjacent to all of the F1 races that went around the world. And so there were always constantly pictures of Brad Pitt on the track with Lewis Hamilton and Max Verstappen lining up. So like they were actually about to race, but I think like the logic was Brad Pitt would just nip in the lineup and some cameraman would go there and they would get it. And the film really nicely is placed in the world of F1. Yes.
And just a purely outsider layman's perspective on this, I assume that he was able to do that because this is at the official F1 movie. It's not called it's F1 the movie, and the logo is the logo of F1.
Totally,
Company,
it's like imagine calling a sports film NBA, or FIFA, or like whatever you wanted to call it. And so, do you know what I mean?
No,
like
exactly.
It is a film about the sport, of the sport, by the sport.
Yeah,
and that's a really interesting thing that I noticed, and kind of I think one of the strengths of F1 is what a celebration it is of the sport of F1 in itself. I am like a 20% fan of Formula One. I've seen 2 seasons of Drive to Survive and really enjoyed them, but you won't personally catch me watching Formula One, but you know, enormous amount of respect for it, great fun, nice time to like go out and have a drink if you're into it. Anyway, this is F1. Starring Brad Pitt. Brad Pitt plays Sonny Hayes, who is a retired racing driver from the 1990s, who is in like, I think he's in Daytona at the what's it called where they go around?
NASCAR.
Oh, yeah. He's like a NASCAR driver. Right. You know, he lives in a trailer, and he's sort of like,
oh my god, this thing writes itself.
Swigs a beer, but you know, he wakes up, brushes his face, and goes straight out and does it. And he's approached 30 years later after he retired by struggling Formula One team by Ruben Cervantes, played by Javier Bardem, in a gorgeous. He comes into his world in this gorgeous suit, and he approaches him with this crazy idea. He says, "Look, I'm really struggling here. How about you come and join the F1 team?" Which is ridiculous that a 30 years retired F1 driver would just be brought back in to race. And I don't know if you know about F1 drivers are teeny tiny little men by function of like they're very lean, very fit, but they're small and they're lightweight to drive a car. Brad Pitt's like tall, he's a big guy. And also I think there's something really true about like when your reflexes and your ability to make really quick decisions is usually at your best from when you're like 13 to in your mid to late 20s, and then from then your reaction times just go down. So the idea that Brad Pitt, who in this film would be like into his 50s, would be competing at the highest level, it's just ridiculous. But you know what? It doesn't matter because it's a movie. It's a movie. It's quite fun, and it's like there's this old school, new school thing. And he is going to be driving alongside Joshua Pierce, who's played by Damson Idris, who is the young, new gen rookie who has his own ideas about what are the best ways to race.
For a separate team?
No, there's always two drivers for every team.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah? And
I know nothing about Formula One.
So there's always, there usually is 2 drivers to every Formula One team, and they are both a team and competing against each other.
Right.
So it's kind of like having 2 tickets to the raffle.
Right.
So in the race, everyone's got 2 drivers, and sometimes one driver is considered to be the number 1, and some drivers are considered to be the number 2. And in the scenario where both of them are racing, one of them will be told, you need to let what's supposed to go. You let them go ahead, and that can be very political. They're of course supporting each other and taking other people out with like different things, but also very competitive if he wants to be the number 1. So there's that whole dynamic. Joshua Pierce is very social media savvy. He's in that new world of like PR and building his brand, and he has all, you know, when he works out, he does it with the VO2 Max thing, and it's all the technology based. With Brad Pitt, just he runs out on the track and he just goes running, and it's old school, couple of sit-ups. And so the film is better. You've also got Kerry Condon, who plays one of the chief engineers of the car, and there's drama over the car and which car do we use and how do we fix it if the car is rubbish. And basically we live out the remainder of the F1 season, and it takes place and it's filmed in the F1 season, whatever it was that they were filming in. And here's what I think is really, really great about the film. As a sports movie, what a wonderful accompaniment to a real-life sport in a way that didn't make it that cheesy. I liked how much all of like James Horner and Toto Wolff and all of these characters that you've seen in that TV show were all a part of it. And there's a moment where in real drama, Brad Pitt is about to race and he's lined up, and Max Verstappen and Lewis Hamilton are right next to him. And even though they aren't characters in the film, it really places this whole film in real life. And I just thought that was really cool and actually very unique. And I wouldn't be surprised if like FIFA or NBA are looking over the shoulders going, hang on, like, can we not do a really great drama sports film, but like Jude Bellingham and Kylian Mbappe are like next to our main characters? And what's interesting about this film is that there are no villains or antagonists, really. Actually, as far as the race goes, you'll hear like Brad Pitt racing and it's like Max Verstappen is right behind you. And sure as shit, the shot is Max Verstappen's car. You can't see it's him, but I'm like, they have filmed so much footage at all of these events that like it feels like, as far as I was aware, Brad Pitt and Joshua Pierce and Doves Interest, they were all part of that season. And like that to me was really exciting. And I've never seen as a sports movie, it placed itself so wonderfully in real sport, in something that feels modern. And I think maybe like 20 years down the line, it will be this wonderful time capsule of Formula One at the time. And I just thought, I've never actually seen anything like this. Like maybe the film Goal, which I don't know if you've seen, was quite a fun one where you would see like Alan Shearer, David Beckham, like have cameos. But I really just kept seeing all of these characters. And I thought, that's really, really cool. So as a sports movie in that context, I've never seen that before. I know that like in Creed, it was a Tony Bellew was the one that fought Jake Gyllenhaal in Southpaw. Right. I always thought that was really funny. But as a sports movie, and sorry, I just want to say the races themselves beautifully captured, everything you'd expect. That camera, IMAX camera, 6 inches above the ground, rolling around, and all the footage they got of every single angle to tell the story of a race, really well crafted. And it's the same thing when I watched the fighter planes, like trying to tell a story of things flying through the air and make it make sense as A goes to B goes to C. I thought all of that is very well executed. And I've just celebrated it as a sports movie for getting all of that right. However, as a sports movie, there usually is there are so many parameters and great reasons to really like scratch a little bit deeper at the characters. The drama as a sports movie, I think, is where the film slightly lacks. There are certain scenes with certain characters who have like tussles and arguments that just do not jump off the page. It felt like writing, it felt like dialogue. I almost think like you've got so many great ingredients here, and sports movies are usually quite good at getting deeper into the characters and who they are and what they want. And on that level, F1 is ever so slightly surface. And if I'm comparing it to Top Gun Maverick, where I did care for the characters and I did really feel something and I wanted that person to go and do that thing, I never really got super into the drama. And often it felt silly. And in my screening, there was quite a lot of laughter at some of the arguments because it just never really came off the page. And then looking back at it, yes, they shot at almost all of the major F1 races. Like they go all over the world. At a runtime like north of 2.5 hours, I was like, we could have probably lost one of these. I know you went there and you probably shot like really expensive shots, but I get it. Yeah. We did quite a lot of racing.
Was it 2.5 hours, isn't it?
Yeah, it might be 240. It's long. So on one hand, like really competent celebration of F1. And I think if you guys are fans of F1, I reckon you'll enjoy it. There'll be things I didn't even notice. There's so much to enjoy and laugh at, but not at the expense of it becoming cheesy. I'm disappointed a little bit at the actual ingredients as a drama. I think it just ever so slightly fell short for me there. So I think it's still worth watching. I think it's great fun. I think all of the action is brilliant. There's elements of Brad Pitt's character, and not necessarily his performance, that feels a little bit too unaffected and jaded, almost like he's stoned for the whole thing. And I kind of wanted to get
cool for school.
A little bit too cool for school, and I didn't really see like a new dimension to Sonny in that sense. So that's where I'm sitting with it. I will say I saw it at the Leicester Square Cineworld, which is a really big
I'm seeing
screen.
It tonight,
Which I'm seeing it tonight, and it was like it wasn't a big multimedia screening, but quite a lot of people were there. But it was only centre block, kind of busy, but I'd say like 75% full. So like I had a seat next to me empty, which was very nice. And I took Big Ryan, who also had a seat empty next to him. So it's kind of like a busy crowd, but not like super jam-packed. And that's where I'm kind of sitting with it. I'm not particularly disappointed. There are elements of it I think.
You think with a bigger crowd it might have done better, or
potentially? I think maybe it could maybe feel more of like a passionate F1 crowd. You could find more moments to like capture the audience with. So that's where I'm kind of sitting with it. I still think as a celebration of the sport, it's done so well. And also, sorry, like F1 is like, especially if you're from the outside of it, there's such an inundation of logos and brands and like the comically like everything is a brand, and that should feel really, really annoying. But I kind of feel like what they did was all of these brands have paid to be associated with F1. Yeah. And this is an F1 movie, so therefore all the brands are fine. Leave the brands as is. Yeah. I'd say there's a couple of like brands which have paid extra to be like front of the side of the movie. But almost like that didn't matter because the identity of the brands, I'm not saying this is a good thing, has become part of like the identity of Formula One.
Yeah.
And I was kind of like curious as like where the brands were sitting because it was still so heavily branded. In any other movie, it would be like so egregious to have that. But I was almost like championing it for making the brands part of the film, which I don't really know. Like, it definitely wanted the taste of a lovely Heineken Zero at the end of it. And how about Qatar Airways? Aren't they just the best airline? So yeah, like I have no real like bad thoughts to say about it. I think it just slightly underserves itself as a drama there.
Okay, well, we do have an email about it, which I'm not going to read out in case it's got spoilers in, but if you could just dip into that folder.
Ryan writes in to hello@popkitchenpodcast.com just like you can and says, F1, the movie. Hello, guys. Just out of seeing F1 after managing to get tickets for an early IMAX showing, I wanted to share some quick thoughts about it. First off, I want to say I'm a huge F1 fan, and this is one of my most anticipated films this year, and boy, did it deliver for me. The action throughout was mesmerizing, and getting to see the cars captured in that was an unbelievable visual for me. I don't think I've been so tensed up in my seat watching a film probably since Top Gun Maverick, to be honest. I would say, though, the story itself was a bit predictable overall. It took a couple of turns that I didn't expect, but the through line and ending was what I expected. This, however, did not stop me loving the film. The storyline away from the racing was really enjoyable, and the chemistry between Sonny and pretty much everyone else is what sold it for me. The brotherly love with Javier Bardem and the felt so real, and big props to Brad and throughout. I know Lewis Hamilton was brought on in early production to be a producer and ensure that it was realistic to a degree, but that it was to be true to F1. However, I did notice two mistakes that I can't let him get away with. Max overtakes JP at one point, and JP had his DRS open. As JP was in first, he wouldn't have had a DRS. No idea what we're talking about there. And then, spoiler there. So yeah, not exactly like these matter, but nice to see I have one over Hamilton. All the best, Ryan.
It almost sounds like, given all the moving parts of essentially delivering a corporate movie, it is a corporate movie,
God, totally.
The price you pay is having it a little bit safe.
Yeah.
But in order to deliver good spectacle. So when you started describing it to me and you said he was a racing car driver 30 years ago and he's brought back into that, I was like, oh my God, I know this movie. I've not even seen it. But it's like, the price you pay for having, that's the price you pay in order to make the rest of it work.
Yes.
You need nuts and bolts to secure the really electric, frenetic stuff.
Yes. Because like Top Gun Maverick was definitely cheesy. But it got really down into it. I always love the second half of Act 3 of Top Gun Maverick.
Yes.
Once they're there, and you're like, oh my God, this is getting even.
When it's just
better.
him and
Miles
Teller.
Yeah. You know, that moment, you realise it's got another element to the mission. It wasn't just the mission; it was more. And you, for example, you've never seen Drive to Survive.
Never.
So there are going to be multiple moments in the show where a person who you don't know who they are will go like this to the camera, or they'll barge past someone and walk past, or they'll make a comment.
Right.
You'll go, who's that?
Right.
And actually what you need to know is that is like a mainline character in real life F1.
I now know what it's like to watch a Marvel movie if you've never watched a Marvel movie before, to watch the Avengers and have never seen a single Marvel movie.
It'll really be like that. And like you should know that those are really playful winks. And those are real life people who've obviously been tapped on the shoulder during their actual day job and been asked to give a reaction. And it's almost like it'll completely go over your head. I have like a surface understanding of it, and I'm sure there were loads I missed. But that's what those are for you tonight when you go and see it. Okay. You'll know exactly what they are. Okay. There's like really, really big ones. But I'm actually curious to hear, once the film is out in people's hands, not that you hold it, more reactions to it. And if you're a big, I got the film.
Hey!
Is
it perfect?
I'm curious to see if you literally have no interest in F1, have never watched an F1. Let us know what you thought. And then similarly, if you're a massive fan, like so that didn't feel cheesy to me because I'm very unemotionally attached to F1, where for some people might be like, oh, you got that person.
My only real knowledge of that world is the Senna documentary, the Asif Kapadia one, which was really good. Yeah. And then obviously I've seen Ford v Ferrari and Ferrari, which I wasn't really
Yeah. Rush? You like Rush?
Rush is okay. Yeah, Rush is solid.
Rush
Solid. Yeah. I'm James Hunt, and I'm a bit of a layabout. And I'm Chris Hemsworth. I'm post Thor, but I'm kind of cool. Yeah, and I'm a cocky Brit. Yeah. And then Daniel Bruhl doing great stuff.
That was the film if you haven't seen it.
That was the film, you haven't seen it. Okay, now moving on to 28 years later. The third film in the 28 franchise, 28 period of time franchise.
Yeah.
Let's just sort of recap where we are with this, because the franchise has been dormant for many years and now it's come back. So the first film in 2002, 28 days later, directed by Danny Boyle, written by Alex Garland, starring Cillian Murphy and also Naomi Harris and Brendan Gleeson and Christopher Eccleston.
Yes, lots of actors.
Was it was really. I remember being quite a kind of seminal, iconic film of the era. Everyone talks about how interesting it was to see London completely deserted and emptied. And sure enough, in 2020, when the pandemic hit, everyone was referencing, well, that's like 28 days later.
And I think became like really iconic, apocalyptic iconography of what it would look like to have an empty city. I feel like that was still being held up as the best representation of that.
And also, it was fresh because it was a kind of a British take on a very, at that point, Americanized genre, which is the zombie genre. I know they're not zombies, but please, if it still falls into the same genre, please, if you're really one of those people who still goes, excuse me, they're actually technically still alive, you can do one.
Everyone who maketh a zombie IP never wants to admit they're making a zombie film. They always want to be like, oh, it's they're infected. Oh, there's a wasp just coming to have a look at you there. And he's gone. You scared that wasp so much. It's all right. We've got a wasp here. That's it. Laptop sleep. And he's gone. Well done. Nobody ever wants to admit they're making a zombie thing. No, it's actually like it's an archaic unpacking of and they happen to be sort of the undead, but actually they represent our own living worlds. And
it's like, they're zombies, whatever. And actually, in 28 years later, the word zombie is used at one point by one character.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know if you caught that, but I was like, and they dropped that in.
You used it. Yeah. And there's also there's always the question in the IP where the zombies outbreak, do they have fictional zombies? In their world. Are they like, guys, is no one reacting?
So I think they do in this one. Anyway, and it was like I said, massively iconic and huge. And I kind of remember being of an age where, I think my brother was 11 when that came out, and I think he saw it fairly soon afterwards. And I was aware of me being too young to see it, and him being like, oh yeah, 28 days later, it's crazy.
Yeah. Very iconic poster as well.
Very iconic poster with the biohazard thing, the red eyes, and famously shot really low budget on those stuff. Which actually, if you look back at it, although it creates this really strong guerrilla, grungy, like quite gnarly aesthetic, some of it does look a bit shit. When you look back, you go, there are some scenes where you think that would have been better if you just shot that on a proper cinematic camera instead of a crappy.
It's almost like, I agree. Like I flicked on like 35 minutes of Days just before I saw Years, and I was almost like, it does look kind of rubbish, but it now it kind of places it in time. And at the time it placed it in reality. Yeah. And it still is like a curiosity to watch it in that way. Like, of course, Wasp's back. Wasp's back! My God. He's out again. And stay out.
It rooted in reality, didn't it?
Yeah,
absolutely right. And I think I've said this on the show before, but I will say it again. When I watched 28 Days Later for the first time, which was only like 4 years ago, my main takeaway was it's only an hour and a half movie, but it really actually feels like 3 little episodes stitched together. And I feel like...
Funny about years, right? We'll get on to
and I'm somebody who used to watch a lot of The Walking Dead. I watched probably about 6-7 seasons of that. Watching 28 Days Later in hindsight, I kind of thought, you can see how they would be better to build this into the world of a TV show. Then 5 years later, we got 28 Weeks Later, which was not directed by Danny Boyle, not written by Alex Garland. I think it might have been made by a different studio even.
Also filled with stars.
Right, get this. So I watched this for the first time yesterday, just before 28 years. So I had a full day of it. You've got not Robert Carlyle, which was we all knew that, but Imogen Poots, Rose Byrne, Idris Elba, who's just in it, Jeremy Renner, and Emily Beecham as well as an actor who's in it. And 28 Weeks Later is both referenced and retconned in 28 Years Later, which I found quite interesting. They use a little bit of something about it, but they also basically go, we're not doing where that film ended up. And I will say 28 Weeks Later has a great opening scene. Actually, some quite good set pieces. I don't know if you know the basic opening scene. I think I can say this because you're not really it. Is this obviously that home invasion and they've been sheltering. It kind of begins in the middle of like a conversation between Robert Carlyle and his wife. Then the rage virus people, the infected, get in. And there's this moment where Robert Carlyle has a split-second decision to help his wife or go out the door. And he runs out the door and he leaves his wife. Right, yeah. And he runs, she's like banging on the window behind him and he's like running and they're chasing him. And then half an hour later into the film, we learn that his wife is actually still alive. And that is actually a really interesting idea.
Yeah, good idea.
However, the film becomes very generic and becomes actually much more of like a zombie escape thing, which is a shame. But not awful, but it's kind of, you don't need to see it. It's just there. It's a spin-off, it's a standalone, it has no reference to that. Anyway, that was in 2007, so 18 years later, we now get 28 years later. And true enough, actually, there was a third movie that had been kicked around for a long time, went into development hell. 28 months later, when Alex Garland released Ex Machina 10 years ago, he sort of said, I'm still thinking about it, we're working on it. And it was only sort of post-COVID that him and Danny Boyle sat down and really focused on it, and we get 28 years later now, the first of a planned trilogy, the second of which, I didn't realize this, is coming out in January.
I learned that
directed by Nia DaCosta, with which follows on straight from this movie, shot back to back.
And also, I think it was just over a year ago, Cillian Murphy was doing interviews and he was confirming, I'm producing a 28-day sequel with Danny Boyle and Alex Garland, and like, we didn't at that point know if he was going to be in this one or is it the next one, and we still don't really know. But it's kind of like it was all kind of talking about it. Yeah, but he wasn't in this trailer. Yeah. And so that was always a curious one. But like I saw only just before I went to go and see the film, I learnt of the trilogy that had been planned. One of which has already been shot. I think the third one will be on whether or not these two make money. But interesting.
I think so far it's making good money as well.
Yeah.
Anyway, it brings us 28 years later, which is standalone story. But before we get into the main film in general, James, I had the opportunity.
A lovely chance to speak to both Alex Garland, writer and director in his own right, and director Danny Boyle for 8 minutes. Just ask them all about coming back into the zombie genre, their inspirations, some of like the expressive cinematography that was used. So please enjoy this conversation with Alex Garland and Danny Boyle. Thank you so much for meeting with me today. First of all, massive congratulations on the film. I saw it last week alone at Sony in a screening room, and I've just been desperate to talk to someone about it.
I think this is their technique. I think Sony is sending people in kind of on their own to watch it.
So it seems. Yeah. Interesting.
I'm thrilled that the first people I'm speaking to is you guys. I'm both massive fan of your films, and it's genuinely a career highlight to get to speak to you today.
That's very kind.
Congratulations on the film. So, obviously this is a legacy sequel. You guys are returning to the 28 Days franchise. What sort of really made you want to come back to this and reflecting on the series now?
Look, there's lots of answers to that. It's got lots of constituent parts, and probably the answer I'd give depends on what I just said before as the answer, and trying not to repeat myself. But for me, in part, this is personal, but I think it's also something we share, which is you feel protective towards the original film. There's something about it you really just don't want to break. And film has a really complicated but very obvious relationship with commerce. And I needed to feel I could trust my own reasons to make a follow-up. And I'm not sure I trusted myself in a time frame that was closer. I have to say, I didn't want to. I didn't really want to make a sequel to it closer to that, but part of that was to do with suspicion. And so much time had passed that I felt like we could look at this in a kind of clean way, and a sort of internally honest way.
I think it's also the ambition. It allowed the time passing since the not quite 28 years, but 23 years, gives you not a clean sheet, but it does induce that feeling that you could sort of, if we're going to do it, we could do anything really. And Alex came up with this idea of 3 films, which is an epic, and all within the island, and just this British cast. And it's like, whoa, this is not what people would expect you to do. Expansion feels like, Succession feels like that you'd spread out, and it sort of did the opposite of that. And I love a box. I love getting trapped in a box and then just go, I love that, because and that's a great dynamic tension for me.
I'm a little bit annoyed you guys couldn't have waited a few more years for it to be 28
it
years
later. It would have been too cute.
Too cute. Was there a conversation about actually doing it 28 years exactly?
No.
Too sweet.
I think once you get past 2 decades, you're allowed.
Yeah. And then, Alex, I really enjoyed listening to a conversation you had with Neil Druckmann, who directed The Last of Us.
Big fan of him.
Me too. You both kind of really inspired each other, and you talked about we all sort of exist in the stories that preceded us. And how do you now reflect on both of your contributions to the zombie genre? I mean, in 20 years, we've had so many great things come and go, and so many would have said they've been inspired by you. Coming back to it now, how do you reflect on your contribution and jumping in again?
My reflection would be that there is a contribution, just that. I mean, most if you work on a film, the expectation you should have, if you're being sort of reasonable and honest about it, is that the film will probably not contribute to anything. It will disappear broadly out of people's minds and be essentially, like some kind of Blade Runner quote about tears in rain, or so. It'll just sort of vanish, basically. And I think 28 Days found a sort of foothold and clung to it. And Danny talks about how, as the years passed, he would go to screenings to do Q&As, and there'd still be full cinemas and people would show real enthusiasm, and that is the product of the contribution, I think.
Yeah, the appetite was still there. You could feel it. It's not an illusion. It's not just like Sony or a studio saying to you, there's money in this if you want. It's us actually feeling there is an appetite for it. It's different. Like some of them fade away. Yeah. And there's, and some of them are urgent and feel like they want you to come back to them. So we lent into that with this idea, yeah.
And I really want to ask you about, I thought the film had such an amazing cinematic flair, some of the technology that was used and the way in which just technology, I think, was really expressed in the film. What were some of the conversations you had with Dod Mantle about the sequences, the sort of matrix rig, the type of rigs that we used? What were some early conversations you had about how you wanted to express this narrative?
So it wasn't just with Anthony, it was also with the designers, Gareth Pugh and Carson McCall, who were very... in their own way, in a different world, they're very, very confident filmmakers. And so it was exciting to have a bunch of people and start to think, and also an influence, which was the original film, which we'd shot on semi-domestic video cameras. And we'd pushed the limits of what's acceptable then, resolution-wise. Now the technology is screaming at you, come back to us. Because now we've got 4K resolution and we can, and they're still lightweight. And I like breaking up the classical instinct of cinema. I like challenging that, and you can come a cropper by doing it. It's risk taking, but I thought with this kind of script and this kind of world, you can take enormous risks technically. And see, and the first film proved that to us, and so we inherited that as a way forward. Yeah,
and those moments where the camera swings around, it was some of the best 3D I've seen without it being 3D, because it really sort of placed me in that moment.
That's the idea of it. You just suddenly go 3D for it, and then you flung back out again. It's quite exciting. I mean, when you look to the future, there's going to be more of that. Ultimately, you will be put inside these things, whether it's through the glasses, probably not. The headsets. But in other ways, you'll be put inside them, I think. You'll be pushed there like that.
For sure. And the imagery that was really striking for me was the Bone Temple area and the scenes there. Like, where did that idea come from? How much of that was practical on the day? And was there a moment where you walked onto set and you saw these things had been built where you just thought, oh, my God?
There was a key idea, I suppose, which was that you come across a kind of inverse of Kurtz. Someone who seems like Colonel Kurtz from Heart of Darkness or Apocalypse Now, but actually is incredibly different from Kurtz. But the thing he's doing is he's building a memorial, and he's not differentiating between infected and non-infected. That's the absolute sort of core principle there. And what I have found and what Danny's found, we've talked about this, so I'm not just intuiting this. When you go to a very good memorial, they are stunningly powerful. Yeah. So they can be graves in France relating to D-Day or First World War, or the Twin Towers. The memorial there is absolutely stunning. Yeah. The Vietnam War memorial in Washington and in Cambodia, in Phnom Penh, there is a memorial which is a collection of skulls. And you look at the skulls and you think about the minds that once inhabited the skulls and the lives they represented and how similar the skulls are and how different those people would be. And it's not a morbid thing, it's a powerful thing. And so the idea was a memorial.
Yeah, like death is a great equalizer, sort of everyone being reduced
sure
to
fucking is. Yeah. No two ways about that. Rupert Murdoch will discover that.
Guys, thank you so much. Those are all the questions I have.
What a delight they were.
They were really lovely. They're very sincere, but in a fun way. They're quite like playful. Like they take what they do very seriously, but they're also like up for having a laugh.
Yeah.
Which I thought was really nice.
Sincere and relaxed and nice.
Yeah.
James, you want to intro the film? You've seen it twice now.
I have now seen it twice, so I got to see it early ahead of time before that conversation because I needed to see it before I spoke to them. And then I also got invited to the premiere, and I was up for seeing it again just to kind of confirm my opinions on the film and just because, it's fun to just get dressed up and go to something fun. So, 28 years later, broadly for anyone who's never seen a 28 films, the rage virus has swept through the United Kingdom. It has been quarantined now. That's what we heard.
Yes.
So, which was sort of retconning weeks, right?
Do you know what happens in weeks then?
Broadly, but I'm not.
Okay, the opening line is just like, we're not doing what that said out.
Yeah. And this film that takes place in the northeast of the United Kingdom on an island just off of the mainland, separated by a causeway. And on this island, we have a society living in fairly normal vibes, kind of like Jackson in The Last of Us, but they sort of are like living a fairly normal life, almost like a 1950s village. They do have most of what they need, but to a limitation. There's pubs, there's running water, there's a bit of electricity, and life is fairly normal. You've got Aaron Taylor-Johnson, called Jamie, who is father to his son Spike, played by the wonderful Alfie Williams.
Oh, yeah.
So Spike is 12, 13 years old, and their mother, played by Jodie Comer, called Isla, is very unwell in their bedroom, and it's very unclear as to what is wrong with Isla, but she has some sort of memory, brain issue. She also experiences a lot of pain, a lot of headaches. She's very confused. She doesn't really know how old her child is or what time of day it is or what day of the week it is at all. She has a lot of these episodes, and you can tell that there is a tension between Jamie and Isla. Sorry, I'm getting calls. You can tell there's a tension between Jamie and Isla about that relationship, which has become strained because one has become the carer, and he's also very much looking after his son Spike. Meanwhile, Spike has come of the age where it's the first time he gets to go to the mainland, and almost as a rite of passage is going to be taught how to hunt and how to kill infected. The way the causeway works is that they are very much safe on their island, but the only way to get in and out of it is from a causeway that runs on a very shallow part of the sea. You can only travel on that causeway at low tide. As soon as the night comes in and it gets to high tide, the water rises, and basically you will not be able to cross the causeway, and you will be trapped on the mainland. No one will come and help you. You're on your own, basically. And meanwhile, on the mainland, the infected have evolved and progressed. They've completely rid themselves of their clothes as they would after nearly 30 years. You see these formations of like hunters and gatherers. They're still very fast, they're still very ferocious, but they feel almost more feral. And there are all these lovely sort of like night vision shots of them feeding on things.
Really
and
scary.
there are alphas, and our characters essentially go out, and it's sort of this father-son, at least in the first act, relationship where he goes and he shows him basically how to look after yourself, how to hunt. And the film really takes place as a surprise for me, coming of age tale in multiple chapters for this character called Spike, who I actually didn't necessarily suspect to be the main central focus, but who very much was. And the first sort of chapter is very much relationship to the father, second moving to the mother, and the third kind of teacher, professor, and external influences. But I've now seen it twice. I saw it in a screening alone with one other person.
Wow.
Aim, a friend of the show, and we both were sort of like reacting to it as we came out. And then again, I saw it in a premiere setting. But interested to hear your thoughts. You've seen it last night.
Just saw it last night, yes.
28 years later, how did you get on with it?
It's great. It's really great. And it's bold and it's refreshing and it's different, and you have that feeling of going, oh, we're back. And not only does it deliver the thrills and the scares and the excitement of a 28 movie, but it also unpacks it, takes it in a new direction. And I think everyone who sees this film will be surprised that what it arrives at in its conclusion is not a climactic scene of horror and despair. What it is a deeply emotional conclusion. And I could hear it in my auditorium when I went to see it. Everyone was kind of caught off guard by this, but it works completely well because, as you said, the film actually becomes a coming-of-age story for Spike, who's brilliantly played by Alfie Williams. Let's start with Danny Boyle as a director. I feel like we haven't seen a Danny Boyle film in a while. The last film he directed was Yesterday, which is that Richard Curtis Beatles movie, which is awful. But I don't blame him for that. It's very much a Richard Curtis movie. Danny Boyle's made too many great movies. We let him pass on that one. And there is something really exciting and not, for a belated sequel, you could say, for a franchise, this doesn't feel stale. It feels very fresh and new. Totally. You have this, we've lots of conversations been having about the fact it was shot on multiple iPhones, enhanced iPhones, and the way they've done that with the action shots, where the kind of the arrow goes through and you spin around, you clock the other side. I don't know what you call that type of filmmaking, but it's really effective. There's scenes where the slow moving infected on the ground, you kind of got a camera on their back. Really great. I think also it uses this very abstract, aggressive editing style where there's a scene when Jamie and Spike first walk along the causeway to go to the main land. We get this increasingly abstract editing where you're intercut with shots of, the Rudyard Kipling poem got in, but also shots of men going to war. Actually, clips from 28 Weeks Later, the sniping scene, and Laurence Olivier as Henry V, and arrows, and it's kind of repeated, and then cut also with the red night vision of the horde out there, and it's
horrible. It's horribly.
Unsettling. It's very unsettling, and it creates this suspense, and also this fear of complete unknown about heading to about where they're heading. We know the infected from the previous two films, but by this really particular editing style, it really brings you there. I really liked that the score. The score, Young Fathers, Mercury Prize winning band, but I don't think they've ever done a score before. Yeah. I think this is the most exciting score since Challenges last year. Yeah. Really, it shouldn't quite work, but it does. It's hopeful. It's haunting. It's
very like British pop in some senses.
Yeah,
it
just completely works. Performances, obviously, we know Aaron Taylor-Johnson can deliver the goods. We know Jodie Comer can, and Ralph Fiennes always shines. But Alfie Williams, if you're going to have a movie that centers around a child. That kid actor needs to be really good. And this guy is really great. So props to him. And also Alex Garland as well as a writer, because we've become used to talking about Alex Garland as a director in the past few years. Obviously, he writes a lot of his own stuff, but the way we've talked about the construction of the story in this film and where it concludes, and he actually said that one of his influences was Kes, which is the Ken Loach film from the 60s. I don't know if you've ever seen that, which is a great movie, and you can see its influence here. And I'm like, I props to you, Alex Garland, for writing the story in this way and taking it and building it in that way. So I was really impressed, and actually it kind of snuck up on me when the film ended. I really thought there was another half an hour or an hour to go, and it kind of ended. I thought, wow, I've been really carried by this. It succeeds in delivering its raison d'etre of being a zombie-style thriller, but also delivers so much more, breathes fresh life. And I kind of got to the end and I thought, this world is so much bigger. Yeah. And I'm ready for it.
I've been desperate to speak to someone about. I say at the start of my interview that I saw that in a film in a vacuum. Yeah. And I saw it with one other person, but I was so excited to speak to people about it. And the first people I got to speak to about it was Alex Garland and Danny Boyle, which was always overwhelming. And I was like, I saw this alone at Sony and I need to now speak to people about it. But so pleasantly surprised. Yeah. And 28 Days is as a film that was coming out this year, I was anticipating it, but not hotly. Yeah. I had no predisposed impression of I really hope I enjoy this. I was like, I will see it and I hope it's going to be good. Yeah. 28 Days is cool. And what a pleasant surprise. Yeah. We talk about 28 Days, adding a refreshing reinvention of the zombie genre. Them coming back to this now, 20-something years later.
23, yeah.
And once again, injecting it with this wonderful, expressive storytelling and cinematography. Yes, some of it was shot on iPhones and some on other characters, but the story is not that it was shot on an iPhone. No. The story is how wonderfully expressive and just remarkably concise and brilliant it is with cinematography. iPhone doesn't really matter. I think they're just ultimately all tools to do exactly what they need to do at that moment. And those moments where the camera does spin around, it's the best type of 3D I've seen without it being 3D, because it places that thing in real space. I agree, the cast are all incredible. I was completely I had my mind blown multiple times by the emotional depths that it went to. This just wonderful sort of imagery, the first time they're running back from the causeway to the island, and the whole sky is lit up with the Milky Way, and it represents all of these different things. And then as soon as Ralph Fiennes comes into this film, I think he completely steals the show, and a performance that was just mesmerizing, and everything that it had to do of shifting what are usual symbols of nastiness, toxicity, and death, like a skull. Yeah. How that gets repurposed into
Yes.
something incredibly sentimental and beautiful. And it was like therapy, the way in which it spoke about death itself and what that means. And I just thought, I remember going into that scene the second time thinking, I wonder if I'll have the same emotional reaction the second time round. And it was even more for me because kind of I knew it was coming. I think it's easily the best film of the year so far that I've seen, by a long way. And interestingly, some people have. I remember catching up with some of our peers as I came out of the premiere screening, and I remember saying, "What did you think?" And some of them were like, "Not really sure." And there are a couple of polarizing reviews where people hadn't quite got along with it. And again, that might be due to people's expectations of what a 28 film is, but I quite like that if you haven't seen Days or Weeks, this totally works alone in a vacuum. It's one of those wonderful sequels that like everything that really matters is still going to work for you if you haven't seen anything. And I think that's such a testament to acknowledging the fact that it's been 25 years. They can just go on and make something and say what they want to say about what it is that makes a zombie film good. I thought it was such an amazing triumph of a movie, and I was so pleasantly surprised about all the things it tried to do I never thought it would do. I think I'm less interested in the idea currently of there being 2 sequels to this film.
Yes.
I will say that finding that out, I think that the film ends on a note that is totally complete for me. And actually, though I really liked the epilogue and I thought it was great fun, I think the film almost could have worked without it. I think we had a version of our character who was quite fully formed, and I thought that works as an ending, but nonetheless, I thought it was fun. I've not seen the sequels. I'm sure they could be great. I quite like the idea of this just kind of happening, and maybe we don't hear from 28 until it's like 28
decades later.
So yeah, like as something to set up something else, I'm a little bit lukewarm. But as a film, as an emotional experience, as an allegory for death and growing up and moving on from different figures in your life, I think it's like absolute perfection. It's brilliant.
I also think we'll talk about this in the spoiler cast. It carefully introduces lots of ideas, which I like was what Alex Garland's doing. There's 1 or 2 ideas that they bring in that I go, okay, that's a little distracting for me, and I don't know that I needed that. We'll talk about it on the spoiler show. But I second the thing about the cinematography, like the shots of the Alpha shadowed with the horde behind him, just sort of running. It's
coming over the hill. It was just brilliant. So cool. And the thing about Alex Garland as well, like he's always said that originally before he became a writer and became a director, he was an illustrator and he wanted to draw, and he loved telling stories visually through comics and through illustrations, and he's always kind of kept that way in which he writes with his work. And I've always felt like you can see an illustrator's eye on his story. And with this, it's not that it feels comic booky, it's that I just feel like he writes with a really distinct visual connectivity to all of his scenes. And when you see that then expressed by Danny Boyle, who's such a master at work with with the music, again with the editing, you really see that creative partnership just thriving.
I really felt watching the film, like Danny Boyle said, we could do it that way, but what if we did it this way? Why do it the most straightforward way when we can do it the most interesting, new, bold way? And I as an audience member, I found that so refreshing and so rewarding. He wasn't just turning up and delivering a 3rd movie in this belated franchise. He was actually making very conscious artistic decisions, which was great, very rewarding.
I mentioned this in my chat, but I really do recommend you watch this hour-long podcast that Alex Garland and Neil Druckmann, who wrote and directed The Last of Us, they talked about inspiring each other and how they both write. And obviously, like, this has come out as Last of Us is like this hugely popular show, and there are a lot of like similarities to that. But if you are interested in how like they wanted to take the genre, do their own thing, then I take this and do my own thing. They both admitted they heavily inspired each other, and it's a really, really fascinating conversation. So I do recommend that if you're interested.
Well, if you've seen 28 Years Later, you can write into the show and let us know your thoughts, like several of you already have. Adam Barlow writes in and says, 28 Years Later review and watching Days and Weeks the first time.
Nice.
Dear John and Greg, I'm running out of ideas.
Good.
Thank you for encouraging me to brave 20 Years Later in the cinema because I thought it was excellent.
Yeah.
I watched Days and Weeks for preparation in the 2 days prior. 28 Days Later was a really pleasant experience. It felt refreshing and unlike any other horror film I'd ever seen. Admittedly, that isn't a large number. 28 Weeks, however, was so obnoxious yet so boring. Sure, the opening sequence is cool, but none of the characters are likable and they all flame. Oh, yeah, the characters... Oh, nothing annoys me more than characters in a movie making stupid decisions. Anyway, that makes the newest entry my favourite film of the lot, which I'd probably agree with, actually.
That's what annoyed me about Mickey 17.
People making stupid decisions.
Constantly. Yeah, sorry.
I cried in the final act, loved the playful camera work, and genuinely think it is one of my favourite performances from Ray Fiennes.
Yes.
It did bring to mind Peter Serafinovich's impression, but I am a huge fan of this too. The rest of the cast are top-notch as well. Props to Alfie Williams for carrying such a heavy weight on his shoulders.
Yeah.
Surprisingly, it was the soundtrack, courtesy of Young Fathers, that really stood out to me. Tracks like Promised Land, Lowly, Boots, Travelling had me bopping in my seat or truly locked into the apocalyptic world. I particularly liked the siren noise that rumbled in a few tense moments. As a final note, the only thing that didn't work for me was
Yeah.
I understand he's there to show, but took away from. I didn't mind that as much.
We'll talk about it in our spoiler cast.
Pulp Kitchen continues to be my favourite podcast, so thank you for always delivering such brilliant discussion, humour, and insight. All the best, Adam. Thank
Should
you,
say
Adam.
we are going to record a spoiler cast just because I think there's a couple of plot things we want to unpack. So stay tuned for that if you're interested in hearing. If you've seen the film and want to hear some more. This next one is from Ryan, who writes in and says, "Hello again, guys. Hope you've had a good week. I booked myself a late night showing last night of 28 Years Later after watching the first two throughout the week to prepare for it, and I'm so happy to say that it was brilliant. Being from up north myself, I was so happy seeing a big production being set up there. Although very much reclaimed by nature, it was also really warming to hear Geordie accents on screen. Yeah, true, you don't often hear Geordie accents on screen. Aaron's accent was really well done. A few slip-ups that were a bit jarring, but nothing to worry about, and Jodie's was flawless.
Jodie Comer is flawless.
If you
in
do
her accents.
Geordie wrong, you sound Jamaican. You're like, oh, weird, man. The young lad Alfie Williams had such an excellent performance throughout, and it is a local and he is a local Gateshead lad, really hoping that he goes on to have a successful career. I thought the overall story for the sequel was brilliant, and Danny Boyle managed to bring so much style to this film without lacking in any substance. It's like very stylish and expressive, but not in like a flashy way.
No.
It's not like cheesy or like nouveau. It's
Well,
just
like-
like hard boots on the ground filmmaking
Yeah.
that's really expressive. I thought the editing in the first half was amazing. However, it seemed to become a bit more linear for the second half, but I was locked in throughout. The speed of the zombies in these films has always had me on the edge of my seat and genuinely worried for the people in the scenes, which I feel like a lot of zombie movies just don't have. Yeah, that scene which you've seen in the trailer, the FPV over the green hill, the picturesque tree on the hill, and the silhouettes just going
And they're
there,
just
they all
running.
swarm. Brilliant. The fact that it was filmed on iPhones, although I know they have a crazy amount of equipment attached to them, really made me feel realistic, almost documentary-ish, as you might have seen about a rig of 20 iPhones used to get the sweeping, rotating shots of zombies being shot. I thought this was used expertly in the film. And yeah, it's like some of it was shot on iPhones, some of it wasn't. The iPhone's getting the story, but really it's a mishmash, I feel, of like whatever they needed to use to get exactly that shot, which I actually think is usually would be quite jarring if you were switching between technology, but in this it just kind of worked.
Should we just skip over the
Bit of spoilers, and then looking forward to hearing your review. All the best, guys, and Godspeed, Ryan. P.S. It's going to be a big July with Super Jurassic 4 out of the three. What do you think? 1, the winner at the box office. 2, which will be the best film critically. And 3, which are you most looking forward to?
So that's Superman, Jurassic World,
and
which we're
Fantastic-
seeing this week,
seeing it,
and Fantastic Four.
So, which will be the winner at the box office? I'm going to go with, because Jurassics do really well.
And Marvel has been underperforming each time.
I think it's either Superman or Jurassic, but I think Jurassic has more of a pull for non-film fans, whereas I think people are fatigued by superhero, which is what Superman is.
Which will be the best film critically? I'm going to say Superman, actually.
Ooh, okay.
I'm just going to take a gamble and people go...
I think people, they love it.
Yeah.
To be different, I'll go Fantastic Four. And the one I'm looking forward to the most is... Ooh. Do you know what? It would be Fantastic Four if we hadn't got a Superman core film in so long.
Yeah.
Because it looks
we
so
haven't had
different.
yeah.
It's not Man of Steel 2, no disrespect to like that,
Yeah.
but because it's like calling it Superman, it's new. I'm almost like more curious.
I am more curious about that.
Fantastic Four, I am really drinking the Kool-Aid for.
Yeah.
Yeah, good questions there. That's good.
Okay.
We'll report back.
Next up is from Anders, who writes in and says, "Hello, George, 51%, and James, 49%. In brackets, equally loved." I don't get that. Although I would tell you what,
Brexit reference.
I said in Letterboxd that 28 Years Later is a documentary that shows what happens when Britain is isolated from the rest of Europe.
Yeah. Sure.
It's not quite the laugh I was expecting there, but it's okay. Do you want to deliver it again? There we go, I'll use that. 28 Years Later, I watched it on its premiere without having seen the previous movies. Still worked as a standalone movie for me. Ironic, because it's the first of a new trilogy. My Letterboxd is full of reviews about penises, but my only thought is Ray Fiennes doing his best version of Willem Dafoe? No?
Oh, it's a Willem Dafoe role.
But I feel like it's more sincere and
Yes.
warm than
William Dafoe. Don't get me wrong. William Dafoe could do that.
Oh,
in
he
the
could do it in his
morning.
sleep.
Yeah.
Easily. One take.
Yeah.
Genuinely funny movie and probably the best version of a zombie movie I've ever seen. And now on the perfect movie,
Yes.
he will say, what was really perfect about the conversation was the pizza analogy. Thank you. I
put it
support it
in the front
100% and I will start using it myself. Thank you. Pizza analogy, I stand by.
I put that at the top of the cold open.
Anyway, my nomination would be In the Mood for Love. Yeah, not a perfect movie. Looks beautiful, it's amazing, but it's too slow. Anders from Norway. Yeah, brilliant.
Yeah, fun fact, there are a lot of phalluses in this film. All fake.
Yes,
because there's a child actor in there. You're not allowed to have real genitalia exposed to a child. Too right.
So they just put fake genitalia
Yeah,
on top
there's
of it.
someone who was I was listening to Greg James's chat with Aaron Taylor Johnson and Jodie Comer, and said that, like, oh yeah, my mate made 60 fake penises for 28 years later. It's like, well, someone's got to do it. This next one is from Freddie, writes in and says, 28 years later.
With an 8. Later.
Hi, lads. I'm not sure if I'm a bit late to the cutoff on this, so just a quick note. Freddie, you're right on time. I caught 28 years later on Friday night. To say I was excited was an understatement. 28 Days is a childhood favourite of mine. Brackets, I remember not being able to sleep as a 9-year-old after watching that first scene in the laboratory, and I've been in love with the film and horror since. So my anticipation was sky high, and I was fully prepared to be disappointed. I'm delighted to say that this film delivered on pretty much every front. It's interesting, like, he came in with a lot of excitement, wanting to not be disappointed. I came in with, like, I'll take it. I'm just so glad I can now say it's one of my favourites of the year.
I think it's one of the best trailers we've had in a long time.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that for disclosure. We did do a paid thing on social media for talking about the
just
trailer.
to promote the trailer.
Just to
but
promote the trailer, not the film. We hadn't
views
seen
are
the film.
alright.
Yeah,
Yes.
we hadn't seen the film. But separate to that,
Yeah, it was cool.
The great
and it had
trailer
that,
was really cool.
all the audio bits and
Yeah.
like leadings with
up and down again.
So many standouts, interesting themes, great performances, and brilliant action. Extraordinary visual effects and cinematography. But the highlight for me was the constant flow of big storytelling ideas throughout. I'll avoid spoilers, but this took some massive swings.
Yeah, it
They
did.
don't all pay off perfectly, but it made me so happy to see so much creativity. Afterwards, my friend turned to me and said, it just looks like Boyle and Garland allowed themselves to have fun. This sums it up perfectly. It feels like a sequel made for the right reasons, i.e. they actually waited until they wanted to do it and had a decent idea. Roll on parts 2 and 3. Keep up the brilliant work on the pod. Cheers, Freddie. Yeah, I really agree like that.
Yeah.
Like the creative partnership just finally being fully expressed. I do kind of think just could have left it. I would have loved it to have been its own thing. Maybe these sequels are going to be brilliant.
So
It just looks like given the landscape in which our films
the 28 years later, the Bone Temple, which is the second one, which is coming out in January, which is so soon actually. It's written by Alex Garland, so I think Alex Garland has. That gives me hope that he genuinely has a 3-part story that he wants to tell, and it's heavily rumored that Cillian Murphy may appear in that one. Well, we will see.
So that's all we're going to do about 28 years right now, but we will be releasing a spoiler cast very soon for those of you that have seen it, where we just want to go into and probably just like gush a little bit about some of the moments in the plot. So stay tuned for that. But in the meanwhile, let's read some general emails. George, we go through some of the emails that we get sent into the show every single week. As always, guys, if you want to send in your thoughts, your questions, your concerns, your reviews, you can, of course, send them in to hello@pulpkitchenpodcast.com, or you can support us at the VIP tier on Patreon and have priority access to have your email read out on the show. You should also just check out Patreon in general.
It's great.
It's the best way to support us. We do an entirely different podcast on there called Double Take, which is our weekly news show. Recently subbed George while he was away. You were gone but not forgotten.
That's nice.
But got to use Fred Asquith.
Yep.
Big fan of him, and he's
Friend of the show.
featured on our social media, and also Benedict Townsend, James Bond correspondent.
Yeah.
And we went into James Bond while I had him.
I bet.
You're not going to not go into James Bond.
You don't get Benedict
We did
without
like
Bond.
casting updates,
Nice.
and all of that. But it's great. So go check that out, and it's a really different show. In the meanwhile, this first one is from Emily. Emily writes into hello@popkitchenpodcast.com, just like you can, and she says, "Dear gents, an American fan here, echoing recent letters to encourage more content about movie soundtracks and scores if possible. I'm a professional musician and have always been impressed by your detailed discussions on the impact of music and sound on film. For example, through your firmly established and well-deserved appreciation for Reznor-Ross scores, and innovatively through the sound game.
Well, I hope you enjoyed the Young Father score of 28 years later.
I'm not sure if this will be of interest to other sirens, but I wondered if there is any story behind the theme music for the show. The track that appears in in the titles and at the end after each installment. It's perfectly edited, and I suspect many long-time listeners have a Pavlovian response to it as I do,
Yes.
as it primes us with great anticipation for another witty and engaging episode. With a game, Emily. Emily. First of all, we would love to do more content around soundtracks in scores. I kind of feel like whenever I start thinking of the best way to do it, I always feel like robbed by the fact that due to copyright, we won't be able to. I think it sucks to talk about scores if you can't play any of them. I've said this many times. I think you and I should do on Patreon a kind of like a Desert Island Discs thing where you and I choose 3 or 4 of our favorite, or just like scores we want to talk about. We tee it up. We play the score in its entirety so people get to listen to it, and then we discuss it. And then I go, and then you go, and so on. And it feels like a 50-minute episode. Because I think if we talk about a score for 5 minutes, yes, they might have heard it, but if they haven't, I still think it's good to do it. So let's park it. If we do it, it will, unfortunately, by nature of like how the internet and advertising works, it would have to be behind a paywall. And then the music for the podcast, though, has quite an unremarkable origin. It is just something I found on a licensing site. Very much put it in there as like, how do we feel about this music?
It was the vibe, wasn't it? We just
the
liked the vibe. We liked
and
relaxed,
I think we never had a problem with it, so never changed it. But what I will say is that personally, I think I've always found with a podcast that lots of people are going to listen to at different parts of the day, ours is quite lo-fi, chill, relaxing, jazzy, twee, slightly comedic, but not too abrasive, right?
Yeah.
Like it's quite easy to listen to. I think it's a good philosophy for podcasts is to make your podcast quite easy to listen to for wherever anyone else may be at that given time.
Right.
For example, if we had a track that was like, hui, boing, wah, 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 not that that would be the thing, but if you go really intense, like that person might not choose your podcast before they go to bed.
Yeah.
And maybe first thing in the morning, they won't want to listen to it.
Yeah.
So as a baseline, even though you and I are quite animated and we talk quite quickly and we love a good humdinger, in general, that tone of music sets a very universal and agreeable listening experience. And that's why I like the track.
I just called it the vibe, but James has explained it very well.
Just as a philosophy.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think it makes it for easy listening.
Yes, totally. You want it palatable.
Yeah. Palatable.
Next email is from Arlo, who writes in about remakes. Hi, fellas. Greeting once again from New Zealand. I hope this email finds you well. I recently finished watching season 2 of The Last of Us, and like many others, was feeling quite underwhelmed by the unfaithful character writing, the poor pacing, and the overall lack of urgency and hopelessness that made the game so much more compelling. James did a spoiler
Season 2
review
spoiler cast,
of that. If you have seen Last of Us season 2, go catch up there. After such a disappointing season, it got me thinking why there's so many remakes these days and why do they almost fail to live up to the original story? Obviously, we know the answer is dollars, but when you have so many remakes, reboots and retreads but when so many remakes, reboots and retreads have had poor critical reception, one can only wonder, when will it end? Despite the new How to Train Your Dragon receiving mostly positive reviews, I simply refuse to go see it, as I'm done watching the same story done shallower and with less creative passion behind it.
Everyone else has gone to see it 'cause it's made loads of money.
Yeah, but I've heard it's like shot for shot the same. While my opinion on remakes is quite clearly negative, I'm certain there's a bunch of older films that make great candidates for modern day remake. My question is, if you could remake one movie, what would it be? Oh, my go-to choice has always been Back to the Future. Its premise would translate very well to modern times, and seeing the time-traveling escapades of a teenager in the era of the internet and social media would be a nice way to mix things up.
That's kind of like a reboot more than a remake, isn't it? Because if you're not remaking Back to the Future going 50s to 80s to 50s, if you were to remake it...
I guess it's a kind of remake,
What,
right?
to do it to 2025 to the 90s? That's like a reboot. You're sort of like... It's not remaking the original.
Yeah, well, not shot.
You're
Not
rebooting
shot.
the series.
I mean,
instead of giving it new characters. It's not going to be Marty McFly again.
No. Oh, yeah. True. Its premise would translate. Blah, blah, blah. Once again, thank you so much for creating a platform for film lovers like myself to engage with. What you two do is very special and brings a lot of joy to people's lives. But thank you, Arlo. I love that. I'll be listening week in, week out as I eagerly await the upcoming Pulp Kitchen episode 200. Cheers.
We'll have
Arlo.
stuff to say soon, hopefully about 200. Please do stay tuned.
What would you like to remake, James?
Oh, what would I like to remake? It's very little. It's very, very little. It's kind of like the Star Wars prequel.
Yeah.
But obviously that doesn't need to be done. There's very, very little I want to remake off the top of my head.
Same.
I just need another Godzilla. Do you know what I mean? Give it a chance.
Remake the 1997 one.
Yeah.
But like shot for shot, do it the exact same
Give
way.
that IP a chance, please. James Bond. Kind of though, like they need to remake.
They do need to
remake James Bond.
in our eyes. Yeah, they need to completely. That's a reboot. They need to reboot that from. There's a different button on the keyboard.
Yeah,
You know.
they killed Daniel Craig.
Yeah.
Spoilers for No Time to Die. But yeah, they killed it. Like it's fine. You've done it now. You finished it.
Yeah.
Now go back. Also, with just like the success of How to Train Your Dragon, it's not that I was rooting for it to fail. I'm more just like, now this has done so successful, I'm going, well, fucking hell, what else is 15 years old that they're going to remake now? It's a ringing endorsement to do something which I
Cloudy
don't
with
really...
a chance of meatballs.
Exactly.
I
made this
live
thing
action.
on Double Take. It's like The Social Network is 15 years old. Is that going to be remade? I know it's a completely different film to How to Train Your Dragon, but just as a philosophy, to only reach back 15 years ago, I'm a bit like, I don't like the message this sounds to the rest of Hollywood.
Or franchise everything. The Queen's Speech.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think of other movies from 15 years ago.
yeah.
Deception, not Inception.
Deception, yeah. Inception 2. Conceptions.
Inception 2010. Wow, what year that was. A long time ago now.
You know, Batman Begins is 20 years old.
Wow.
Does that make you feel old?
It does. That feels sooner, more recent than like Revenge of the Sith.
Yeah. Yeah. Remake Salt with Angelina Jolie.
Wow. Or The Tourist with Angelina Jolie and Johnny Depp. Or
Yes.
Night and Day with Tom Cruise and Cameron Diaz.
Yeah.
Or
Shutter Island. You going to remake that?
Oh, yeah.
Nanny McPhee Returns. You going to remake that?
A Green Zone.
Kick-Ass. You see if they remaking Kick-Ass? Wow. Did Kick-Ass make loads of money? It got a sequel.
Yeah. The sequel is awful.
Yeah.
Oh, it's so bad.
Yeah, it's really bad.
And Kick-Ass itself is kind of dated.
You're going to remake Due Date?
That's a remake itself. That's a copy of Planes, Trains and Automobiles.
Oh, yeah, of course.
The Green Zone. Do you remember that? I've just seen that forgettable thing. It's a Paul Greengrass non-born.
The Other Guys? You're
Matt
going to
Damon
remake
movie.
The Other Guys? Do you know what I mean? It's like Black Swan.
127 Hours.
Yeah.
Red with
Red.
Bruce Willis. That's rubbish.
All
That's
right,
a
we made our
rubbish
point.
movie. Yeah, we made our point. All right.
Okay.
Did you want to read Jacob?
This next one is from Jacob, who writes in with subject line, please watch How to Train Your Dragon 2010. Hey, Pulp Kitchen, I hope you're well. I'm currently halfway through your review of How to Train Your Dragon 2025 and can't help but think you'd be so much more impressed with the animated original. The live-action remake is incredibly close to a literal shot-for-shot remake of the original. For that reason, I understand why you have a great time watching it.
It was a great time.
But almost every compliment you gave for it, I would argue, rings more true for the original. It has more heart, quirkiness, and more emotion, in my opinion. As you mentioned, the remake feels cartoony in a way. Now imagine the whimsy, slapstick style, and thrilling action pieces with the full freedom of animation. Hiccup and Toothless's bond is stronger, which makes the final climax and subsequent aftermath more emotionally impactful. Cartooniness in mind, the characters of the remake felt clumsy and slightly dulled compared to their animated selves. Globber, for example, feels like a shell of the beloved mental figure from 2010. Brackets love Nick Frost, but it's not the same, sadly. Fair enough, the live-action flying scenes were really impressive, and I imagine on IMAX it would be such a joy to watch, but there's still so much more to enjoy with the original, and I think you'll be impressed. The test flight scene in particular is stunning. I'm trying not to make this a rant, because I'm glad that you others enjoyed the remake and how it will induce so many people to the How to Train Your Dragon world, but don't let it trick you into thinking the original isn't worth a watch, and the two sequels, they are equally great, the second installment being arguably even better. Cheers, Jacob. I believe you.
Yeah, I believe you.
As you said, like I have just seen.
I think it's
that
very.
movie.
It's even more unlikely I'm going to go and watch the original now.
Yeah.
Probably when I have kids.
And I heard other people had said, "Oh yeah, you should see the original. It's the same but better." But I don't know what to do with that information. It's still this franchise, this IP, still isn't for me. Do you know what I mean? And
Yeah.
that's by products of my age.
Yeah.
That's nothing against it. Well, George, those are the emails that we had for today. We still have loads of emails, and loads of you written in with like, what were your perfect films? Like Bevan's written in, and we're going to save that for another time. Bevan's alive, guys.
She's alive.
She's going to be back.
This is like the Michael, directed by Michael Bay ending, and it's like, what? Bevan's alive. Done. Yeah.
I'll face myself. So you just see like the email come in from Bevan.
Yeah.
Directed by Michael Bay.
So she's around. Let's conclude.
George, as always, Pop Kitchen ends
With a game.
Leonardo DiCaprio. What an actor.
Oh, what a guy.
What a guy. Leonardus DiCaprius, as his Latin root.
I'm sure.
From the Latin root.
The derivation.
I want to know, George, and he's got a lot of great films.
I'll say.
He's an actor with the most good films. He has very few bad films, Leonardo DiCaprio.
The ratio's great.
His ratio's very good. There aren't many bad films he's done.
No. Well, we'll see.
Meanwhile, George, I want to find out what films you prefer of his. So without further ado, do you like Leonardo DiCaprio? Sorry.
Yeah, well, you're about to find out. Yeah, but broadly, yeah. I don't gush for him like I do for other actors, but I think he's good.
He's really exciting to me. He's got a new Paul Thomas Anderson film coming out.
That's right.
Right, George. Are you ready?
Yeah.
I want to know which Leonardo DiCaprio film you prefer. The Wolf of Wall Street or The Revenant?
Wolf of Wall Street.
Wolf of Wall Street or Titanic?
Wolf of Wall Street.
Wolf of Wall Street or Don't Look Up?
Wolf of Wall Street.
Wolf of Wall Street or Django Unchained?
They're both good performances, but he's a supporting actor in Django, but he steals the show. I still think I'll go for Wolf because he's in that whole movie.
Wolf of Wall Street versus Revolutionary Road.
Haven't seen it. Wolf of Wall Street.
Wolf of Wall Street versus Shutter Island.
Wolf of Wall Street.
Wolf of Wall Street versus Gangs of New York.
Wolf of Wall Street.
Wolf of Wall Street versus Great Gatsby.
He's good in it. Wolf of Wall Street.
Wolf
Better
of
film.
Wall Street versus Blood Diamond.
Wolf of Wall Street.
Wolf of Wall Street or Killers of the Flower Moon.
Killers of the Flower Moon. To change it up, respect the fact that he is a good performance in that.
He is very good.
Sinister, stupid character, nasty.
Plays his role.
Yeah. Killers of the Flower Moon.
Killers of the Flower Moon or Once Upon a Time in Hollywood.
Killers of the Flower Moon.
Killers of the Flower Moon or The Departed.
As a Leo, I'll go Departed. I'll go Departed.
The Departed or Catch Me If You Can.
Catch Me If You Can.
Catch Me If You Can or The Beach.
Catch Me If You Can.
Catch Me If You Can or Inception.
Catch Me If You Can.
Catch Me If You Can or J. Edgar.
Catch Me If You Can.
Catch Me If You Can or Body of Lies.
Catch Me If You Can.
Catch Me If You Can or The Aviator.
Catch Me If You Can.
Catch Me If You Can or Romeo and Juliet.
He is great in it. But Catch Me If You Can is great.
It's one of his best performances.
I think it is one of his best, yeah.
And that's Leonardo DiCaprio. I didn't put in like What's Eating Gilbert Grape because I don't think you've seen it.
I have seen it.
Oh, you have? Well, there you go.
Catch Me If You Can.
Just so you know. He's
done a lot of
Wolf of Wall
movies.
Street at the front it's one of his best performances, and he's in that full 3. I think as well. He's in it for 3 hours. It's brilliant.
It's his movie, and he plays it through different ages and stuff. And look,
Yeah.
all of those other films where I passed on, he's still good in those
He's
films.
brilliant. Yeah.
Like, I don't want to disrespect Gatsby or The Aviator or Gangs of New York.
Yeah.
He is great in all of those.
What a list of films he's done, though.
He's done very well. He's
very
done very
good
well for
work.
himself.
Yeah.
Hasn't he?
That Leo.
No,
I'm talking like he's your child's friend.
Yeah.
Who's got made a lot of money.
That Leo's
He's done
doing very well
for himself.
He used to live round, I think he did.
I hear you're doing very well.
Yeah. Well, as long as you're enjoying it, that's the main thing. Yeah. As long as you're enjoying it. Every parental barbecue you've ever been to.
And then you're looking very well, which means you've lost weight.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. Oh, okay. No. Oh,
Right.
as
A
long as you're enjoying it.
podcast.
Yeah.
Oh.
Oh, great.
How do you listen to that?
I caught up with I met a family friend recently who would ask all the right questions, show an interest, but wouldn't let me finish the sentence. They would go, "So a podcast, and how does that work then?" Well, what we do is we upload. He goes, "Oh, right, and how do you make money on that?" Well, the brands get in touch and says, "Right, brands, because I listened to something the other day. Do you do something like that?" Well, no. And every time I'm trying to offer an explanation, but to them, the list in their head is being ticked off.
Yes, yeah,
And at the end
I
they
know
go,
everything about it, yeah.
and at the end they go, "Well, I think it sounds great."
Good on you. At least you're enjoying it, hey? Yeah. Friend of mine who's he's like a family friend of ours, known me my whole life. Discovered the podcast, is very much enjoying it. Loved our adolescence review because it's very much like crossed all of the. Yeah. And he, despite having known me my entire life, said, "I really struggle to distinguish between you and George when you're talking as a listening experience." And I was like, "How interesting!" Because he knows me very well.
I know people have said that in the past.
And I'm sure we, over the years, have rubbed off on each other in so many ways and will have matched how we talk quite a lot. But yeah, even he's known me my whole life and he struggles with that.
So I used to think this, and I sometimes maybe could understand that, but I thought we've increasingly sounded more different, but maybe that's because my ears are so attuned to our voices.
How similar I am to
you. Yeah, I can hear the minute differences between ourselves.
Yeah. Who knows?
Let us know, guys, if you have
Some
trouble.
people might be listening and be like, yeah, that's George.
I do
that's
feel like
James.
sometimes in an email people have referenced things that you've said when actually I've said it.
We've had people be clearly deeply confused.
And didn't someone write
in
recently and say that you look like a George and I look like a James?
That's happened, yeah. It's happened a couple of times. Come on,
please.
Okay, guys.
That's all we have time for. Thank you so
Thank
much
you
for
so
listening
much.
to
to this episode of Pulp Kitchen. Don't forget, we post new episodes of this show every single Wednesday.
And we should hopefully have a big episode next week on Jurassic World Rebirth.
Yes.
We are the summer blockbuster season, guys. Get ready for that. Please continue to follow us on Instagram and TikTok. We're posting lots of exciting things there, including Film Bites. We dropped a Film Bites with Nick Mohammed from Ted Lasso recently, which was great. We're hoping to queue up many other guests soon. And don't forget Patreon, which is the best way to support us, as we mentioned already on the show. Have a great week. Stay tuned for the Spoilercast 28 Years Later and other bonus content coming up on the feed this week. Have a good one, guys.
Bye,
Thank
guys.
you as ever to our producers, Phil and Dave.
Thank you so much. Bye, guys.
Bye. Late but not forgotten.